Is your hand down?
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Lord, the next witness to be called is that of John Johannes Nicholas Vermaak Meyer. It will be done virtually, my Lord.
Was he also on the list? Oh, this one.
He would be a new witness. Lord, his statement will be handed up eventually and marked as Exhibit M4.
Okay.
Now, my Lord, before we commence in earnest, Mr. Mayor is not being represented at the proceedings. May we, after the oath is administered, confirm that he does wish to proceed and without representation being present?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. Pardon me for calling you sir, but it's a religious term that I use.
Okay, no, that's all right.
Thank you, sir.
May I have your full names, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Please state your full name.
Full names is
Yeah.
Johannes Nicolaas Vermaak Meyer.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any objection to take the prescribed oath?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you swear that the evidence you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Say so help me God.
So help me God.
Mr. Mayor, I'm told that you are proceeding today without any legal representation. Is that so?
That's correct, sir.
Do you want to proceed without legal representation?
So if I believe that I need legal representation, I will let you know.
Oh, okay. Is it one of the witnesses who should be warned or?
Well, no, not
Okay.
one, but
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may proceed, Mr. McDonald.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor, good day.
Sir,
My name is Mr. MacDonald. I'll be clarifying certain things regarding your statement. Firstly,
yes, sir.
is it correct that your date of birth is the 4th of July, 1956?
That's correct, sir.
And in or about 1977, you were a police official stationed at the Brighton
Yes.
Beach SAP.
That's correct, sir.
Now, did you also make a statement to a Captain Mbele at some point?
That's correct, sir.
Was it the 7th of September 2021?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
After your consultation with Captain Mbele, did you draft your statement yourself?
That's correct, sir.
And you submitted it then to him via email?
That's correct, sir.
The statement that you drafted, was it taken to a police station where you swore before a commissioner?
That's correct, sir.
Was your statement commissioned?
It was.
Now, regarding your statement, is it correct that on or about the 3rd of August 1977, you were at the charge office at the Brighton Beach SAP?
That's correct, sir.
Now, just,
It is now known as a community service center.
yes.
That is where the CSC comes in, sir.
Thank you. Now, in respect to the police station, how long had you been stationed there prior to this date?
I joined the police force in 1975. I was stationed at Brighton Beach in 1976 when it opened, and I was stationed between Wentworth Police Station and Brighton Beach Police Station. I can't remember exact dates, but at that time I was at Brighton Beach Police Station, sir.
Could you help us with a description of the station in terms of its layout?
It is situated in Grey Park Road. If you approach the police station, there's a driveway, a tar driveway, if I can remember. And right next to the driveway, the charge office is there. And then behind the charge office was the 2IC and the station commander, the armory, and the secretary.
Okay. And just before we go forward, just on that, to clarify, the charge office that you say is situated at the driveway, this was opened to the public?
That's correct, sir.
And obviously for a period of 24 hours a day?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So, go on from there with the layout.
From there, if you went down the passage, you got the lounge and the wet canteen, and then you got the barracks with the kitchen, and upstairs was the then district commander and his substitutes.
Okay, so your description then is of the ground floor, which is what the charge office was on, the community service center.
That's correct, sir.
And the first floor is then where the commander sat.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Now,
And the part of the barracks was there as well.
yes, the single quarters and the married quarters.
That's correct. Sorry, the married quarters are situated at the back of the police station.
Further down. Okay. And beneath the charge office, would that be then the lower ground floor?
Yes, sir.
Consisted of the parking bays, the garages.
Yes, there was. Yes, that's correct. There was a garage with government vehicles parked there.
Right, and there was also a staircase which led from the lower basement, from the lower floor to the ground floor.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, now this is a staircase that was outside the police station.
That's correct, sir.
And at that staircase, am I correct to say that there was a storeroom?
There was a oil store, if I remember correctly, because at that time we drew our own petrol from the official pumps at the police station.
Right, and beneath the charge office was also a storeroom and a toilet.
That's correct, sir.
And there was also a toilet right next to that storeroom.
I don't recall at this stage.
Is it possible that there was one there at that time?
It's possible. It's possible. It's 44 years ago. I can't remember.
That's fine. The storeroom, do you recall what it was used for, if anything?
No, sir. I don't recall.
Do you recall what the interior of the storeroom may have looked like? Did it have windows?
I doubt if it had windows. I can't recall that.
Okay. And was there a single double door, a single entrance with a double door that entered into the storeroom?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Can you help further then, the layout? At the other end of the charge office, there was a second basement where the geezers were housed. Do you recall that?
I was never involved there, so it's possible, sir.
Okay. So would you be able to help with that layout at all? On the other end?
No, sir.
No. All right. But do you recall the geyser room? Am I correct in saying that may have faced the road that the police station was on?
That's a tricky question. I can't recall.
Now, at that time, 1977 or so, are you able to tell me anything about the residential area, specifically outside the police station? So, at the police station was a road, across the road from the police station. Were there any houses?
There were houses, yes. There were houses.
Would you
All
say-
along the road, right up to the end.
Close proximity to the police station then?
Sorry?
In close proximity to the police station.
Yes.
And would you be able to, if you were to scream from the police station, would you be able to hear at these houses if someone were at the house?
Yes, sir.
It was that close?
Yes, sir. It was right opposite the police station.
And also, this storeroom that I spoke about earlier, with the stairs that were outside, that is closest to the cells, the holding cells.
The one at the bottom of the stairs, yes.
Right, and the cells stretched from one end to the other. Let me retract that, my lord. The cells that were present, did they house more than one prisoner?
Yes, sir.
Right. And each cell, was it for one person only, or did you have different sizes of cells?
No, there was no different sizes. They all housed or were to house the same amount of people.
Now, move to your statement. Your statement was drafted on the basis that it was in connection with an incident that occurred at the station of a death whilst in custody, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Regarding Dr. Hoosen Haffejee, yes?
That's correct, sir. I didn't mention his name because I couldn't remember it.
No, that's fine. And on that day, you were on duty in the CSC.
That's correct, sir.
Who were you on duty with? How many other members were present in that charge office with you?
We were 3, if I remember correct.
Do you remember their names?
Yes. No, sir. I know the sergeant that was there. He passed away a while ago.
What is his name?
Yeah. If I recall, it was
Nordia?
Barker. Sorry?
Mr. Nordia. D. Nordia.
Mr. Nordia, as far as I know, he's still alive.
Okay, but was he present on that day?
That is possible, yes.
Okay.
As I say, I can't remember everybody.
No, that's fine. Let's just confirm that then. The Nordia that we are speaking of, is his first name Derek?
Yeah, he was Hugh Derek Nordia.
Okay. How do you know he's still alive?
I spoke to him about a month ago.
Okay.
Oh, well, let's assume he's still alive.
And where does he reside?
He resigned, I think, a week before I resigned.
No, lived. Where does he live?
Sorry.
Fine.
As far as I know, he resides in Kempton Park.
Okay, Johannesburg.
That's correct, sir.
The other member, do you recall who he was?
Aye.
Well, let's start with this.
Yo.
Was he a white member or an African member?
No, I wasn't African.
Do you dispute then that it was a Mr. Sergeant Madlada?
Good question. Yes. If I recall, yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell us then what transpired on that day?
On that day, I was on night shift,
Right.
which is from 22 hours to 06 hours the following morning. While I was in the charge office, members from the then security police arrived, and they had a suspect with them. I call him a suspect because I don't know if he was charged for anything at that stage. They brought him to the police station and they said, we must detain him in the cells. We then processed him as per then the regulations, which were you remove his trouser belt, you remove his shoelaces, any money or whatever he has on him, you write it in a prisoner's property register. Then you take him down to the cells and you take him into the cell, you show him his cell, the toilet, where you can sleep, the shower that was there, etc. We took him in with the members from the security police. After introducing him to the cell, locked the cell, went out back to the CAC, and as per regulation, we had to visit the cells every hour, on the hour. I went with, I think it's Mr. Nordia, if he was on with me, went with him to the cells. Upon entering the cell and opening the inside solid door, immediately noticed that there was something wrong about the scene, because this suspect was lying on the ground with his lower body naked. I opened the cell door because the lighting was very, very, very bad. I opened the cell door, went inside and noticed that he had undressed himself, put his trouser legs through the bars of the safety gate, tied the legs of these trousers around his neck, and twisted. He must have twisted himself because it was like in a cook sister form. And probably my idea was that he suffocated. I then went back to the CSC and found all the necessary personnel, which was the CIDs, the security police that were there, and they all arrived, and at a stage they asked uniformed persons to leave the cell, and they proceeded with their investigation into the matter, and then the coroner arrived and removed the body. That is all I can recall from that scene there.
Right, let's just go through that a little slower, step at a time. Firstly, you say he was brought to the charge office.
That's correct.
Which entrance did they, that being the security branch members, bring the suspect through? Because as I understand it, there's the public entrance, and then there's one that is behind that leads down to the armory passage.
So I don't know, at that stage the armory was on the same floor as the charge office was.
Yes.
They brought him in from the outside at the driveway. There are two entrances.
Yes.
That time, sorry to refer to it, there was still apartheid. And the left entrance, if you stand in front of the charge office, was for non-whites, and the right was for whites, which they then entered.
And was there anyone else in the charge office other than yourself, Naudé, and Madladla?
No, sir.
No members?
Not at all.
And at any time at night, members of the public could enter the charge office through the same entrance?
They could.
Correct?
Yes, sir. Anytime. It was open 24/7.
Right. Can you then tell me, what was the condition of the suspect, Dr. Haffajee? What was his condition at the time?
Okay, what I could notice is he was nervous, he was shaking a bit. And I put it down to nervousness. Otherwise, I couldn't pick up any injuries or signs of assault or bruise marks or anything on him at that stage.
When you say shaking, can you describe what that was like?
It was a light. Okay, it won't be anybody with Alzheimer's. It won't be that type of shake. Not Alzheimer's, that other one. But when you get a fright or when you go into shock or something like that, it was a light shake. It wasn't a heavy shake. Not like Parkinson's, for example.
Can you recall if he was perspiring at the time? Wet hair?
No, I can't recall it. No. Well, what I can recall is he had a tin of Coca-Cola in his hands, which when we processed him and wanted to take it away from him, which isn't allowed, not in the cells, the security members told us no, he can keep it with him.
And you listed, and this was not the normal procedure to keep the tin of Coke or can of Coke with him in the cell?
No, sir. He was not supposed to take anything with him.
Okay. And
no food, no drinks, nothing.
So why did you break the rules that day?
Well, the persons that brought him in were officers. They were of a higher rank than I was.
So you yes.
And they gave me the instruction. I took it as an instruction that he can keep the Coke with him.
Okay. So if they said to you, discard or this procedure, then you'd follow that instruction?
Yes.
All right.
The high-ranking officer's word was law at that time.
Okay. And who kept or held the keys to the cells?
Well, it was in a drawer, in a desk, and any one of us three could have taken the key at any time to go and visit the cells.
Sorry. And if one of these higher ranking security branch officers requested the keys to go to the police cells, you would follow that instruction and hand them to him?
No, sir, not that instruction, no.
Why not?
One of us would have taken the key and he would have escorted us to the cells.
Even though he was a higher ranking officer giving you an instruction to hand over the keys?
Even if he was a general, sir.
I see. Now, back to what you had noted about the suspect at the time, Dr. Haffajee. Do you recall what he was wearing?
He was wearing a light safari suit. I don't know if you can recall a safari suit.
Yes, I actually do.
Yes.
Was it a long
You
sleeve?
look younger than I look now.
Was it a long sleeved safari suit or a short sleeve?
Short sleeves
Short sleeve.
with a long trouser.
Long trouser. Was it a two-piece? Top
Yes,
and
sir.
bottom? Yes. Are you able to tell us the color possibly?
It was like if I recall, a beigey, dark beige color.
Okay, but it was light shaded as you said.
That's correct, yes.
And you also at your statement say that he may have been wearing spectacles.
I can't recall it. In my mind, I can see him wearing spectacles, but I'm not sure.
And did you take his shoes to be booked into the
No,
SAP?
we don't take. No, we don't take the shoes. We just took off the shoelaces.
Now, at that point when he entered the charge office, was he able to stand
Yes, sir. He was walking quite normally.
quite normally?
Yes, sir.
Sir, if you don't mind, could you just raise your camera slightly? We can't see you completely. Thank you. Let's see if that works.
Is that better?
Yes, much. Thank you. So, as I was saying, you so just to confirm, you say Nodia was present, Derek Nodia, and Shadrach Shabalala.
Yes.
Sorry, Madlada.
Shabalala.
Madlada.
Madlada.
Yes.
Yes.
And just to recap, before that, you said also that the suspect, Dr. Haffajee, was standing quite normally, except for the shaking, shivering.
That's correct, sir.
Can you describe how he was holding the tin can?
He was holding it normally.
One
In
hand,
his,
both hands?
I'm trying to recall which hand. I think in the right hand.
Did you speak to him?
Asked him his name and his surname. And if I remember, we had to write in his age as well.
Okay.
I think that is all. That's the only communication I had with him.
And was he able to speak clearly
Yes, sir.
to you?
Fluently. Yes, sir.
And did you ask him if he had any injuries?
That is a normal question, and he replied, no injuries.
So when you say that, you asked him, do you have any injuries, sir? To which he replied, no, I do not.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. Did you ask him?
Well, I didn't ask. Sorry, if I can reiterate, I didn't ask him, do you have any injuries? We just, as per normal, say any injuries, you know?
Okay, fine.
And he replied, no.
Did you inquire whether he had been assaulted by any person of the SAP?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because he answered he's got no injuries, so I assumed that nobody assaulted him from the SAPs.
How many security branch members brought Dr. Haffajee, the suspect, into the charge office?
If I recall, 2.
Do you recall the race that they were?
Sorry?
Their race? Indian, white?
No, they were both white, if I recall correctly.
Do you recall who they were? Their names?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir, I can't. They'll stand in front of me, I won't be able to recognize them.
I see. That's the face. Would you be able to describe them in terms of their physique at all?
They were well built. They were, you could see they're not weak people.
Yes.
they had on long trousers and they had on shirts, etc., because, I mean, it was hot. They weren't aggressive. They talked to me and to Dr. Haffajee normally. So, yes.
Okay. Then you say you escorted the doctor to the cell.
That's correct. Myself and the 2 members of the security branch and Mr. Nodia.
Nodia, okay. Now, the cells that you took him to, how did you get to the cells? Down the staircase or on the driveway?
No, down the staircase, sir.
And he was able to walk down the staircase quite freely without any assistance from either yourself and or any other member that was present?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. When you got to the cell, am I correct in saying that there are 2 doors to these cells?
Yes, sir. There's a solid door in the front, a solid steel door,
Yes.
which opens into the courtyard of the cell. And then in the cell itself, there's another steel door and a security gate.
And the steel door, that's the second, has the bars on them.
That's correct.
Right.
No, not on them. The bars were loose. It was the door and then the bars.
I see. Okay, so you then lodged the prisoner, Dr. Haffajee, in the cells, locked both the doors.
That's correct.
And what time?
Sorry?
What time was this?
If I recall, it was before midnight.
Are you able to say, well, remember you came on duty at 10 o'clock, as you say, in the evening.
That's correct.
Are you able to say whether it was at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, it wasn't very much later than when I came on duty. So 11 o'clock, 11:30 sounds more or less right.
Okay. You say also that thereafter the security branch members left the police station.
That's correct. That's correct, sir. From the cells, they left. They didn't come back into the charge office.
Were those the only 2 security branch members that you saw that night? The 2 white individuals?
That's correct, sir. That's correct, sir.
Now, you then, did you personally do the inspections on the hour, every hour?
Yes, sir.
Were you in
Well, we rotated. It was myself and then Nodia and then the other sergeant.
Okay. Did you do the first, the second? Which one was it that you attended?
I don't recall because we went down 2-2. We never went alone. We went down 2-2.
And what was the objective of going to check on the cells?
Well, that's a procedure that is followed all over to see that the prisoners are still there, they haven't escaped, they haven't injured each other, that type of thing. Everything is still correct in the cells.
Okay. And am I also correct that political activists or prisoners were kept singularly in a cell, alone in a cell?
That's correct. That's correct, sir.
Yes, you say also that you went in pairs to check on the Dr. Haffajee. How many times did you
That's
go
true.
down to the cells to check?
Well, when we arrived on duty, we went down with a member of the previous shift to see that the prisoners that are in the register are correct and that everything in the cell is correct. And then from there on, every hour, on the hour.
And you confirm
So-
that? Yes.
So it'll be, the next one would be 23 hours, then midnight, then 01 hours, etc.
Okay. And at 11:30 that night, Dr. Haffajee was still alive.
11:30.
Yes, you said that
I
was-
can't recall.
You said that was the time that they brought him, that being the security branch members, to...
Oh yes, sorry. I thought you were referring to the cell, sorry.
We'll get to that.
Yes.
You then went on to say in your statement that you had noticed something out of the ordinary.
Yes, when I opened the second solid door to the cell itself, I saw this person, Dr. Haffajee, lying on the floor. And the whole scene just didn't seem right.
Okay.
You know, it just wasn't right.
Okay.
That's why we went in, because as per normal, if we have prisoners and we open the second door, we look through the bars to see if everything is all right. Due to other prisoners, if they are detained, normal criminal elements, then they would most probably attack us, you know, and grab our firearms, etc. So when I opened this solid door and I noticed that this man is lying on the floor here, his torso is naked, and there's something tied around the bars. You know, it just didn't seem right.
What did you see? What did you notice?
What I noticed is that he's lying on the floor,
Right.
on his back, with his arms beside him, and there was some, at that stage I didn't recognize the trouser. But I saw something tied around the bar and around his neck. And when I went in, I noticed that his torso was naked, he was naked from the bottom down.
When you say you went in, what do you mean? You went into the cell,
That's correct, that's when I opened the bars
the bars.
and went inside, yes.
Can you describe exactly how you did this? You unlocked the door, and how were you able to move Dr. Haffajee?
Dr. Haffajee, if you stand in front of the door from the outside, the lock was on the left-hand side, if I could recall. And he was lying more on the right-hand side,
Okay.
near where the mattress was that they provided with.
Right. So you open the door.
I opened the door slightly, because I'm not big, so I could squeeze through there.
Right.
And then I saw him lying down there. And I alerted Mr. Nordia about it.
Okay. And well, was Mr. Nordia with you at the time?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Madlava though was not.
Yeah, he was not. No, he was not.
Now, when you opened the door and you got into the cell, what did you notice? The facial features, the manner in which the body lay.
Okay, he was lying on his back with his legs straight, his arms straight, his head twisted in this pair of trousers. I felt in his neck pulse if he was breathing, no breath, no pulse. So that's when I alerted Mr. Nordia, and he came in as well.
And how were you able to take his pulse on his neck if it was tied?
Yeah, look, if I can describe to you, it was about, the trousers were about here, around his Adam's apple.
Right.
And got squeezed over here, just behind the ear.
Okay. Is there any reason you didn't check his wrist?
No, because I couldn't feel a pulse there. I didn't check his wrist, no.
Now, you say that he twisted himself. Can you describe the knot at all? Was it tightly twisted?
Yes, it was tight. It was tight.
And
it was very tight.
Was there a handkerchief tied at any point to the trouser? Did you see a handkerchief?
I don't recall it. I don't recall.
All right. Once you had checked his pulse, you determined that he might be dead. What did you then do?
I went back to the charge office. Mr. Nordia stayed behind. I went to the charge office and I phoned the necessary officers, the station commander, the CID who was on standby, and the security police, because they left their number there.
Okay. And before you left the cell, did you close the door, the bar?
I could have. I'm not sure. I could have.
Are you able to say what time this might have been at that you discovered Dr. Haffajee?
This was around midnight, just past midnight.
Now, who attended thereafter? Who came to the scene?
Look, there were so many people. Station commander, the CID on standby. As I say, these members from the security police. There were a few people there.
Mm-hmm. And did the security branch members also attend?
Yes, as I recall.
Were they the same two gentlemen that you had seen earlier that evening?
Yes, sir.
Did they ask you any questions? Were you questioned?
No, sir. No, sir.
Not a single question about how you might have found the body, any description of the body, nothing of the sort?
As they entered, I explained to them what I found. So I don't think they needed any more questions to me.
Okay. And you said that they had told the uniformed branch members to leave.
Yes.
Who told?
Yes. At this stage, when everybody was present there and forensics arrived, etc., they asked us to leave.
Can you say what time
And
this
we went.
was?
No,
time was
I
this?
can't recall it.
Now, you say in your statement that there was an inquest into this incident.
As far as I know, yes. Because we attended the inquest at court at Somsey Road.
Okay. Who attended?
It was myself, it was Mr. Nordia. There were a few of us. I think the security branch members, if I remember, were there.
Was Mr. Madladla there?
Well, not that I can recall. Not that I can recall.
So you're saying anyone else that you remember being present at the inquest?
As I say, Mr. Nordia.
Yes.
Mr. Nordia was present and members from the security branch.
Did you testify at the inquest?
No, sir.
Why not?
I don't know. At one stage, they just stopped the inquest. I was there, I was present, but they never called me in to testify.
And did they?
Why? I don't know. Why?
And your colleague Nordia, did he testify?
I don't think anyone from the uniform branch testified. Him or I.
Thank you. Nothing further at this stage, my lord.
Mr. Bami?
As the court pleases. My Lord, am I correct in saying that you currently don't have a copy of Mr. Mayor's statement? If I heard my
It
Lord
looks like it is a
correctly,
copy,
the
yes.
original is still being...
Yeah, but he's got a copy.
Oh, you do have a copy? Oh, you have a copy, my Lord?
I have a copy.
Okay, okay. Mr. Mayor, firstly, thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon and for making yourself available at short notice. We do appreciate. Now, Mr. Mayor, the court has warned you about your right against self-incrimination. So you are entitled to refrain from asking a question if you feel that it may incriminate you. You understand?
Yes, sir, I understand.
And I should also point out to you that with the exception of serious offences such as murder and kidnapping, the lesser offences that might have taken place in 1977, those have prescribed. But I'm constrained to advise you that lying under oath before these proceedings could expose you to a charge of the crime of perjury.
That's correct, sir.
You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Can we start? I want to ask you about the dynamic that might have existed between the security branch and the uniform branch. Would I be correct in saying that the security branch enjoyed a certain stature within the police? Were they
That's correct, sir.
Were they seen as the elite force within the SAP?
That's correct, sir.
And was there a certain dynamic that existed between the uniform branch and the security branch? Would I be correct in saying that the security branch was in a position to order the uniform branch to do certain things, and that the uniform branch was perhaps in a subservient role?
That's correct, sir.
Did you ever get the impression that the security branch at times were a law unto themselves?
Yes, sir.
So you seem to be agreeing wholeheartedly. Why would you say that?
Well, sir, in my opinion, at that stage, when the, how can I say it, the war was still going on, they had amnesty to do anything. You know, you never heard of them getting into trouble, and they assaulted people, they detained people, they, as you say, kidnapped people. They did what they wanted, and they were running Rambo.
When you say they had amnesty, of course we're not talking about any type of legal amnesty, but because they were above the law, nobody would touch them and nobody would squeal on them.
That's correct, sir.
And would I be correct in saying that even members of the uniform branch were in the same position. They wouldn't squeal on the security branch because
That's correct.
they were so powerful.
That's correct. Yes, correct, sir. We were, to put it to you, that's why we were scared of them. We were afraid of them.
Did you think that if you did squeal on them, there could be repercussions?
Yes, sir. Definitely.
And potentially what kind of repercussions could that have been?
Well, you could be transferred to a place you don't want to be. If you had a position, a rank, you could be demoted. Yes, there were quite a few things. You could be given extra work, unnecessary. Yeah, you could be punished in a way.
And even worse, did you fear that you could come to perhaps physical harm?
Yes. They had that, in our minds, they had that stature, that ability to do it. They won't do it themselves, but they'll get people to do it for them.
So they had their ways and means of keeping everybody in line.
That's correct, sir.
Now, you mentioned that you managed to put this statement together without the assistance of anybody else.
That's correct, sir.
Well, I must commend you because it is a detailed statement that you have put together, which you managed to do, even though, according to one of your statements in your affidavit, that you hadn't heard about this incident until you were contacted by Captain Mbele. So that's about some 43, 44 years later.
44 years later, yes, sir.
Yes. But yet you still somehow managed to remember that the deceased, Dr. Haffajee, walked into the charge office with a cool drink in his hand.
Yes, sir. There are things that I can recall. Some detail I might have forgotten, but there are details that I do remember from many years ago.
And you also remember more or less what he was wearing at the time.
Yes, sir.
And you didn't consult any materials or do some research in the exhibits of this court?
No, sir.
Now, just as my learned friend for the state has asked you, we want your help in trying to work out where Dr. Haffajee was being interrogated, and we can actually flash up an aerial, I suppose it's a Google picture of the Brighton Beach Police Station precinct. And I'm going to ask my learned junior to do that, and you let me know whether you can see the photograph in question. So Mr. Mayor, can you see the photograph, an aerial shot of Brighton Beach Police Station?
It's that long building, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, that used to be called Great Park Road.
Yes, and
No.
apparently it's now known as Dr. Hoosen Haffejee Road.
Yes, sir. I see that.
And can you point out on this photograph where the charge office is situated?
If you look at the top of the photo, just let me see. Just let me draw it closer to myself.
Or just to assist you, you can see that the building is a long building, and it's between Dr. Hoosen Haffejee Road and the car park on the other side of the building.
Yes, sir, I can see that.
Certainly where the charge office is situated today, it's in the far northern end of the building. If you can see where that little
Yes,
hand
that-
is right now, you can just please stop it over there.
Yes, that is the driveway. That is the driveway.
Yes.
And the charge office is, I see there's some structure standing there. And the charge office is right opposite that structure. There's a white dot on the left.
Yes. Okay, that's our understanding as well. Now the evidence is that Dr. Haffajee was taken directly to a storeroom in the basement. Although we are still not 100% sure where that storeroom in the basement is. Would you be able to assist us? Do you know where he was interrogated?
No, sir, I have no idea. The first time I saw or heard of him was when he was brought into the charge office.
I see. So until then you weren't even aware that he had been in the building since 8 a.m. the previous morning?
No, sir. No idea.
According to Warrant Officer Gopal, who was present with the court at the inspection in Loco, well, he pointed out two possible areas. There is a storeroom just around the corner from the charge office, off the car park. No, so I don't know whether you can see that cross.
Yes, sir, I can see it.
So there's an area there where there's a small corridor, and at the bottom of the corridor there's a larger room. Today it's filled with files and shelving, and to the left there were also, I believe, two other rooms, and to the right there was another room with some machinery in it. To your knowledge, was that room or area ever used for purposes of interrogation?
No, sir. No.
And then Mr. Gopal took us to another part of the building, and this is at the bottom southwest corner of the building. So it's where the cross is. Yeah, if you can just stop there. It's on that little corner of the building there. And as my learned friend from the state pointed out, it faces onto the road. Are you aware that at that corner of the building there is a door, and you can descend a flight of stairs, and then you find another corridor with various rooms. You first pass a toilet and urinal, various rooms, one of which has geysers, and the bottom room is also a potential storeroom. In Mr. Gopal's view, that is where the interrogation took place. Are you aware of that,
No, sir.
of that basement area?
No, sir. No.
Did the security branch come to Brighton Beach Police Station from time to time to interrogate suspects and detainees?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Because typically one would expect an interrogation to take place in an office rather than an underground basement in a storeroom.
Yes, I agree with you there, but I'm not aware of any such activities.
And can you just remind us, at that point, how long had you been at Brighton Beach Police Station? You can take this off.
So as I said, I was transferred there in 1976 when it officially opened. I think from there until the incident, I was still stationed there. And there were times when I was stationed at Wentworth Police Station and Brighton Beach. It differed.
So you had been at Brighton Beach. Was difficult to estimate the time, but perhaps for about a year or around 18 months.
Yes, sir. I was at Brighton Beach before it was officially opened. And I was there until, if I remember correct, until this incident and a while after that.
And would I also be correct in saying that unless the security branch actually booked a detainee in at the charge office, if they had simply gone straight to a basement storeroom, you wouldn't know that the detainee was there unless the detainee was brought up and booked in at the charge office?
That's correct, sir.
Would you agree that it is probably irregular and perhaps even illegal for the security branch to bring a detainee in without doing any paperwork and to go into a basement area and interrogate without booking the individual into the police station?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So if we can now turn to when Dr. Haffajee was actually brought into the charge office, and you say on the first page of your statement that the suspect was then further physically searched and found to have no other property on his person. When you say further physically searched, are you suggesting that he was searched before then?
We were searched in the police station after him removing his belt and shoelaces, and then it was the tap search, the body search.
Oh, I see. Okay. Am I correct in saying that at that time when his personal items were removed, that you filled in the prisoner property receipt form?
That's correct, sir. If I remember.
My Lord, in that regard, we refer you to volume A3, page 255 at lines 25 to 30.
Yeah.
So that, my Lord, that's where the prisoner's property receipt form is located in the evidence of the first inquest.
Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor, just to refresh your memory, what you recorded in that form were the following items: 40 rands and 32 cents, one black belt, one blue tie, one packet Texan filter cigarettes, one blue Bic lighter, one yellow Bic pen, one Gold Citizen wristwatch, and one brown leather wallet. Now, my learned friend for the state put a question to you in your evidence in chief. He asked you whether you noticed that the ligature that was used for the suffocation or hanging or whatever it might be was the trousers of the deceased, which in turn had been secured by a handkerchief. And he asked you whether you recall seeing a handkerchief there. And if I recall correctly, you said you didn't notice whether there was a handkerchief present.
I don't recall, sir. I honestly don't recall.
And when you did well, first let me ask you, who did the search and the removing of items from Dr. Haffajee?
He removed it himself.
Okay, in your presence?
In our presence, yes.
Yes. And at that point, no handkerchief emerged. There's no handkerchief
No,
reflected.
sir.
There's no handkerchief reflected
No, sir.
on the receipt.
I don't recall, sir.
Right. And then when the further search was done, that also didn't reveal a handkerchief.
It is possible, but I mean, a handkerchief to us at that stage didn't mean that he could use it for anything other than the purpose it was meant for.
Just so for argument's sake, let's say you had found the handkerchief, would you have taken it away and recorded it, or would you have allowed him to keep it?
Not necessarily. Most probably allowed him to keep it.
And why is that?
I don't know. That was just the procedure. We didn't take the people's handkerchiefs away from them easily.
Now, in your statement, you say that the suspect, as far as you can recall, had no physical injuries or signs of assault which were visible. Now,
That's correct, sir.
I want to put to you the evidence of former Warrant Officer Gopal, and my Lord, I'm referring to his statement at G26. And we'll start at page 1747 at paragraph 58. Mr. Mayor, Warrant Officer Gopal was a member of the security branch at that time and had been present during the arrest as well as during the interrogation. And he has made out a few statements, and I'm just going to read some extracts. Taylor started assaulting Haffajee, first by slapping him randomly, punching him in the belly. It knocked the wind out of him and he buckled over. Du Toit then started to assault Haffajee, slapping him across the face repeatedly. Governor also punched him repeatedly in the back and kidney area. It started out as light slaps and punches, but as the day wore on, the brutal assault became more aggressive. Jimmy Taylor got red in the face and threw Haffajee against the wall repeatedly. Haffajee was crying, shouting out, "Ma, Ma." Major Du Toit began an unrelenting assault, hitting him on his ankles, legs, private parts, buttocks, his back, face, neck, even his armpits. Then I'm skipping a few lines, my Lord. Because Taylor was exerting such force on his head, and this is at a point where Taylor was forcing the head of Dr. Haffajee into the toilet. When Haffajee pushed himself up Taylor let go of him. He hit himself against the wall with tremendous force, which caused him to fall to the ground. He had taken quite a beating by then and lay on the ground, his body shaking and shivering. And then, my Lord, on the next page, paragraph 61. And I should mention that at this point in time, the deceased was naked. So at around lunchtime, Colonel Coetzee arrived. He saw Haffajee standing naked, told him to put his clothes on. According to Gopal, he had to hold him up and help him because he was in such pain. By this time, he was bleeding and crying and visibly upset. Then, my Lord, on the next page, paragraph 62, page 1749. After lunch, the assault continued. They were relentless, extremely brutal. He was thrown repeatedly against the wall. Taylor was hitting him, fisting him, slapping him, and kicking him on the ankles and calf muscles. He was injured badly after being thrown about, repeatedly like a rag doll, and continuously assaulted. It was a violent and continuous assault on him. Next paragraph, 63. Haffajee was bleeding, shaking, and could not stand. He could hardly walk, and I had to assist him. And a bit further down, when he was taken to be placed in the cell, he was walking very slowly. Taylor took a towel, wiped the blood from the side of his face, and sighed. So, certainly from the perspective of Warrant Officer Gopal, that was a brutal assault, many hours of torture that he had endured until he apparently arrived at the charge office at midnight. Would you agree that that account of the assault is somewhat inconsistent with your statement where you say that he didn't display any signs of assault?
Yes, sir.
Did he not appear to be in great discomfort and pain to you?
All I could notice was he walked normally, although slowly. I imagined that was his way of walking. And he was shaking a bit. But other than that, I couldn't see any visible signs of injuries.
And if I can also refer you to the medical report of Dr. Stephen Naidu, my Lord, that's Exhibit G24 at page 1575. And at page 16 of that report, my Lord, well, perhaps I can pause at page 14. I'm just going to read you an extract here. The injuries, and I should state, Mr. Mayor, that Dr. Stephen Naidu is a forensic pathologist who testified in these proceedings on behalf of the state.
Yes, sir.
and he was asked to prepare a report. He was asked to examine the post-mortem report as well as the photographs and some of the evidence laid in the first inquest. And so I'm going to read certain extracts to you. The injuries of the body surface and of the scalp, chest and mesentery. Mesentery is the abdomen area, stomach area. In particular, must be considered as having been due to significant forces and physically incapacitating, and that the deceased would have likely been in noticeable pain and in marked distress for the entire period after the injuries. And my Lord, if we then turn to page 16 under the heading General Effects of the Injuries at paragraph E. With regard to the injuries individually and together, the deceased could not reasonably have been found to be simply awake and normal when and if the cell was last visited for inspection at 0300 hours as testified. For at that stage, he must have had sustained all the observed injuries. Had such visit been undertaken by an objective inspector of his condition, he would have found an injured person in noteworthy pain and distress. Now, I'm going to return to this shortly, but according to Dr. Naidu, by the time the deceased was allegedly brought to the charge office, he would have been in considerable stress and pain, and it would have been obvious to any observer that he had been severely assaulted. Your response?
That is the stress I can understand. As I said earlier, he was shaking, but he was walking on his own. And when inquired whether any injuries, the answer was negative. So I'm not a doctor, sir, and as I said earlier too, I couldn't see any visible injuries or injuries that might slow him down or that type of thing. I didn't observe that.
When Dr. Haffajee was brought to the cell, were all the security branch members together at that time, walking with Dr. Haffajee?
Yes, sir, 2 members.
Just
the
2 members?
2 members that brought him were present.
And did you notice any other members, Indian members of the security branch?
Not that I can recall now.
You don't recall any Indian members of the security branch coming into the charge office with Dr. Haffajee?
No, sir, no.
And when he was...
as I said, it's too long ago. I can't recall every detail, but I honestly can't recall at this stage any members other than the 2.
And perhaps when he was taken to his cell, was it still just the 2 white members, or were there more members at that stage?
Yes, just the 2 white members.
Now, in your evidence in chief and in your statement as well, you indicate that it was normal routine for the cells to be inspected every hour. Am I right in saying that the purpose behind those inspections is to check on the well-being of the detainees or the prisoners?
That's correct, sir.
Now, on page 2 of your statement, and it's the third paragraph from the top, you say, during this hourly inspection, the first after the suspect was detained, a colleague and I visited the cells. So am I right in saying that that time would have been around 1 a.m. in the morning?
Yes, more or less. It could have been later as well, because I can't remember how long the process was after 12 when he was brought in to be detained.
And then in your very next line, you say, and I quote, there was no inspection done during the suspect being placed in the cell and the next official inspection. Just to be clear, are you saying there wasn't an inspection done between the deceased being placed in the cell and then you coming to the first inspection at 1 a.m.? Or thereabouts?
That's possible, because it all depends on the time he was placed in the cell.
Yes. But of course...
Sorry, if I can reiterate on that, if he was placed in the cell close to 1 o'clock, for example, then there wouldn't be an inspection specifically at that cell.
Right. So then the next inspection would be at 2 a.m.
2 a.m., thereabout, yes.
And is it your evidence that there were subsequent inspections on the hour, every hour, so at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m.?
Yes, sir.
And can you just remind me, were you involved in the subsequent inspections? You mentioned it was done 2-2?
Yes, sir.
So
well, not every inspection, but as I say, that Sergeant Matladla, if I'm recalling his name correct,
yes,
and Mr. Nordia would go down and inspect. Then Mr. Matladla and I would go down, and Mr. Nordia and I would go down. So it was a rotating process.
And do you recall how many additional inspections you did after the first one?
No, sir, I don't recall.
So you could have been back at 2 and 3, but maybe not. Maybe it was Constable Nordia and Constable Madlala.
That's correct, sir.
And then at 4 a.m., when you came for the 4 a.m. inspection, that's when you said in your evidence in chief something was not right, and you discovered the deceased lying on his back. Was it difficult to open that? Yes.
Sorry, did I state 4 a.m.?
Well, let's clear that up. The evidence.
I don't have my statement with me.
Yes.
I don't have a copy of my statement.
I can tell you that you don't state a particular time.
Yes.
But the evidence provided in the first inquest was that the body was found at the 4 a.m. inspection. So I'm just making the assumption that when you discovered the deceased, it was at 4 a.m.
That is a possibility, sir.
Right. Was it difficult to open that grill gate, given that the deceased was lying against it?
No, sir. The deceased was a very light-weighted person, and as I said earlier, he was lying away from the lock area, the lock system.
So it wasn't difficult to push the door open, because presumably you would have to push the body as well at that point?
A little bit, yes. Most probably, yeah.
And once you had opened the grill gate, did you then leave the gate on the body in that position?
So honestly, I don't recall.
Well, presumably you would have had to, because in order to exit the grill would have had to be opened again.
Yes, definitely. When I entered, I left it open, so when I came out, it was still open. And but I don't recall whether when I left the cell, I locked the door, closed the door, or whatever. I don't know. I can't remember.
Now, the first inquest concluded in its finding that Dr. Haffajee committed suicide by hanging himself. Although you state in your statement that you believe he twisted the leg of the trousers around his neck until he suffocated. What brought you to that conclusion?
Well, as I found the scene, and I know that if you had to put something around your neck and pull it tight, you would suffocate.
And did it look as if the trousers had been twisted tightly?
Yes, sir.
And did you think it was possible for the deceased to have done that maneuver on his own?
Yes, sir.
And why do you say that?
It's possible. As he was lying down, the trousers was tied around the bars at the bottom, tied around his neck, and he could have twisted himself and suffocated himself.
You recall the physical makeup of that cell, and perhaps I'll ask my learner junior just to find a few pictures, because in that cell there are a few other possibilities that if you wanted to take your own life, it wouldn't have been such a complex maneuver as twisting around in a lying position on the floor. So, for example, he could simply have stood up. So yeah, there's already one picture up. That's a picture of one of the windows, which also has a grill in it, from which the deceased could have stood next to and suspended himself, either by hanging, or again, it would have been easier just to turn around rather than twisting around on the floor.
Sir, to put it to you this way, I don't know what goes on in a person's mind when he either attempts to or commits suicide. He probably had a few choices, but I don't know. I don't know what was going on in his mind, how he decided to do what he did.
Yes. No, that's sure. I mean, we can't ask you to put yourself in the mind of the deceased. But I do have a question for you, but I'll wait until we have seen the other photos. So here's a photo of the grill door itself. And as you can see there were several other opportunities to hang oneself from a higher grill, a higher horizontal slat, which wouldn't have involved the contortions that doing so from the lowest slat would have involved. And then if we can see
okay.
And finally, if we can see the photograph of the toilet the one turning around. Yeah. And then finally, he has a picture of Brigadier Marion standing on the toilet bowl, and behind his head is yet another window, again covered in a grill from which the deceased could have suspended himself. So really what I'm putting to you is that there were at least 3 different possibilities or more of committing suicide in a far more seamless manner, not involving the contortions. So I just put it to you, do you not find it odd, as a police officer, that the so-called suicide happened in that position and not one of the others, which would have been a little more, let's just say, convenient?
It's possible, sir. I don't know what I would have done if I was in his shoes, how I would have done it, and so what went on in his mind at that stage and how he wanted to do it more conveniently or more of a dramatic scene, I don't know.
Do you recall a detainee by the name of Bayempini Mzizi?
No, sir. No, I don't recall.
Because he died, or at least on the police version, in a police cell at Brighton Beach Police Station on the 10th of August 1977.
I heard about a second incident after Dr. Haffajee, but I wasn't there. I wasn't present, that I can recall. No.
Well, on the police version, he committed suicide only 6 days later in a cell at Brighton Beach Police Station on the 10th of August 1977. And on the police version, he was found suspended from the window grill above the toilet bowl. You say you were not present. Were you off duty at the time?
I believe so, sir. I heard, if I recall correctly, I heard about the incident, but I can't recall that I was present there.
Right. Did you not find it a bit odd and strange that in the space of 6 days, 2 political detainees die from supposed suicides in the same police station?
Sir, yes, it is strange, but then again, thinking back to that period, a lot of political prisoners committed suicide. So it wasn't anything really, because before that incident, quite a few, as I recall, that committed suicide in the cells. Not necessarily Brighton Beach, but other police cells as well, across the country.
Yes. Assuming, of course, that they were suicides and not homicides. Assuming
yes.
that they were not suicides masking, they were dressed up to hide a homicide.
Yes, sir, I understand what you're getting to, yes.
Yes. And in fact, there were several inquests into these so-called suicides, and in those days, the typical version was that the detainee committed suicide and nobody was to blame.
Yes, sir, I understand.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Yes.
Well, in at least one inquest that has happened recently, a reopened inquest into the death of Ahmed Timol at John Foster Square in Johannesburg, there the magistrate had found back in 1971 that Mr. Timol had committed suicide by jumping off the 10th floor of that building. But in the reopened inquest in 2017, the judge of the High Court found in fact that he had been thrown from the 10th floor, that he couldn't have jumped. So all I'm saying is that I don't think one can just automatically assume that the incidents in question were suicides.
I agree with you there, sir.
Now, you said that as per the normal procedure, you called the necessary officers. Can you just remind us who you called?
The station commander, which was Captain Potgieter at that stage. The CID member, sure, I can't recall. And then the security branch members. The other people that were present besides them were not called by me.
And when did these individuals arrive at Brighton Beach after you called them?
The CID officer, if I recall correctly, was living in the married quarters behind the police station. And if I remember, he was a warrant officer beside note, I think. The other persons took about 15 minutes to arrive.
And when you say the other persons, you mean the security branch members?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall who they were?
I don't remember their names, sir.
Was it the same two white members who had brought the deceased to the charge office?
That's correct, sir.
So, according to the evidence before the first inquest, that would have been Captain du Toit and Lieutenant Taylor.
That is possible, sir. I don't recall their names.
And did the security branch members go into the cell?
Yes, after the CID, and he was the first member, if I remember, on the scene, having lived so close by. Yes, and they also went into the cell, yes.
Was the cell not in fact a potential crime scene which should have been cordoned off until forensics had done their investigations?
Well, so the normal procedure is, what that was at that stage, is that you call your station commander and the CID and they contact the necessary people after that.
So am I right in saying that the forensics, in other words, the photographer, the fingerprint expert, that they only came in well after the security branch members had been in the cell?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that that would have been improper because the scene could have been disturbed before the forensics could have done their examination?
Yes, sir. I understand what you're saying and I agree with that.
Now, on the question of a suicide versus a homicide, I have to put to you the expert evidence of the two forensic pathologists that the state called for this reopened inquest. I've already put part of the evidence of Dr. Stephen Naidu to you. And I'm also going to be putting the evidence of the state forensic pathologist, Dr. Shakira Holland. Now, they both studied the post-mortem report as well as the photographs of the body and the some of the evidence before the first inquest. And I need to put to you their expert opinion on time of death. Now, on your evidence and the evidence put forward by the police at the first inquest, since the body was discovered at 4 a.m. in the morning, and since there had been an inspection at 3 a.m. when the individual was alive, that the death must have occurred between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning. And I assume that's sort of version that you're sticking with?
Yes, sir.
So, my Lord, if we can refer you to, we'll start with the expert report of Dr. Steve Naidu, that's G24, at page 24 of his report. That's the Annex A, my Lord, where he deals with estimation of time interval since death.
Yeah.
And under the heading rigor mortis, and I'll just quote the paragraph in question. The state of the full development of rigor mortis indicates a useful impression of the time of death. Professor Gordon's finding, Professor Gordon was the pathologist that did the post-mortem in 1977, was that rigor mortis had developed completely and was fully developed in all of the joints he described. Complete rigidity happens between 6 to 10 hours of the death, and the mean time at 8 hours. This would translate to death at between 9 p.m. the night before and 1 a.m. that morning. And if we can turn to Dr. Holland's report, my Lord, that's Exhibit G28 at page 1788. And she deals with the post-mortem interval, that's time from death, at pages 13 to 14 of her report. And again I quote, "The pathologist's scene report indicates that the upper limbs and the lower limbs were in full rigor mortis." And she quotes from a text which states that the time that rigor is established in all joints varies from 2 to 20 hours with a mean of 8 plus 1 hours. And from another text which indicates that rigor mortis in average conditions might be expected to reach a maximum within 6 to 12 hours. The finding of full rigor mortis in the large muscles, like the upper and lower limbs, would significantly increase the post-mortem interval, the PMI. The longer PMI would not be consistent with the explanation of the circumstances of death as given by the police testimony. So in her expert view, given that the deceased was in full rigor mortis, that would have been between 6 and 12 hours, which would have meant that the deceased would have passed away between 7 p.m. the night before and 1 a.m. in the morning. So I have to put that to you, Mr. Mayor, that the experts, on the basis of the reading of the post-mortem report, say that it was not possible for the deceased to have died between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, but that the range was between 7 p.m. at night and 1 a.m. in the morning. What's your response to that?
Sir, I would not put a dead body in the cell. And I'm not an expert on forensics, so I can't answer that question for you clearly. I don't know. That's, yeah, I found him.
And if I can put a paragraph from Dr. Naidu's expert report, my Lord, that's G24, paragraph well, perhaps let's first visit paragraph 43. My Lord, it's on page 21 of that report, at the bottom of the page. The seriousness of the bodily surface injuries after they were inflicted was such that the deceased would, in my opinion, have been in a state of intense pain and distress, likely unable to remain upright. With the head trauma, there is a significant possibility that he could have been already in a stunned stupor or concussion, if not already unconscious. With the chest and abdominal trauma, the deceased would have been doubled up in pain, breathing with difficulty, if not in a state of sudden cardiac death from a cardiac concussion. So in the view of Dr. Naidu, even if the deceased had been alive at that time, he would have been in extreme pain, unlikely to have been able to have stood upright, and most likely unconscious, given he had sustained a blunt force injury to the head. And yet,
do you want me to respond?
Well, according to your evidence, he wasn't in any real discomfort when you saw him.
That's correct, sir. And he was standing upright, and he was walking, and he was talking.
But do you agree that we have difficulty in accepting your evidence, given the two
Yes, sir.
expert reports?
I agree. I'm not an expert on pathology. But my version of what happened is what I found.
And I'm also going to put a final extract to you. My Lord, this is at page 22 of the report of Dr. Naidu. In my opinion, and based upon the injuries and their effects, the deceased was to a great possibility either unconscious or actually dead at the time of the ligature constriction, and serious consideration must be given to the possibility of a homicidal slinging of the body in the position he was found. That's the view. That's the view of one of South Africa's. Sorry, if I may finish. That's the view of one of South Africa's most experienced forensic pathologists. After examining the objective evidence, he was either unconscious or dead.
So I cannot answer on that. All I know is he was alive when he was put into the cell, and he was conscious.
Although you understand, Mr. Mayor, that we have great difficulty in accepting that evidence, that he was not in any discomfort, that he was able to walk, because that flies in the face of objective forensic evidence.
I understand what you're saying, sir. But as far as my memory goes, and I will stick by it, he was alive, he was well, and he was walking. Furthermore, I cannot pathology, in terms of pathology, answer you on any of those type of questions.
Yes, now I'm not expecting you to give an expert view on the medical evidence. I'm simply putting that medical evidence to you. Now, at the beginning of my cross-examination, I asked you about the culture of the security branch, and I asked you about the relationship between the uniform branch and the security branch, and your evidence was that the security branch were the kingmakers, and they could issue orders, and those orders had to be obeyed, and if they were not, or if you squealed on the security branch, you would suffer serious repercussions. That was your evidence?
That's correct. That's correct, sir.
So I'm putting it to you, Mr. Mayor, that you found yourself in that position, and that in fact what happened...
No, sir.
And that in fact what happened...
No, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I may finish, and you can respond afterwards. In fact, what happened is that you were a very junior police officer at the time. I don't think you were more than 21 at the time. And you were confronted with this particular state, and the security branch imposed upon you to insert the entries as if everything was normal, when in fact everything was abnormal. That the deceased was either in a deceased state at that time or in a very debilitated state and had to be carried to the cell. I put that to you, Mr. Mayor.
No, sir, I completely deny that.
No further questions, Your Lordship.
Ms. Keshav, any questions?
Thank you, my Lord, no questions.
Any other examination, Mr. MacDonald?
No, thank you, my lord.
Mr. Meyer, that concludes your evidence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.
Yes, Mr. MacDonald. Do we have a witness tomorrow?
No, we do not, my lord.
So we'll proceed on Monday.
That's correct, yes, with, I believe, Mr. Gopal's testimony.
Okay. The proceedings are then adjourned to, is it the 13th on Monday?
Correct.
1-3? September?
That's correct, my lord, yes.
Thank you. September 2021 at 10. Thank you. The court is adjourned.
Authorized.